Good morning. I'm part of the local trade union council and local representative from the Fireburg Age Union, and today is a good day. Today we gather ahead of International Workers' Day, so let's hear a big welcome for the fabulous teachers here among us today. The brilliant cleaners among us. Respect to you. The amazing nurses and doctors and healthcare workers, the outstanding civil servants, committed council workers, public servants, transport workers, posties and all the workers from every corner of our lives. Climate activists, campaigners, anyone calling for change, representing the many unions and the many colours of the flags that we carry today. And look at all of you, aren't you brilliant? Today is a good day because we celebrate and fight for the good things in life, our civil freedoms and our liberties, our workers' rights, our public services, our healthcare system and the future of education, our civil service, our young, our old and our most vulnerable, our precious environment. As we look across the sea behind us, we recognise the crisis people face, fleeing persecution, being denied their freedoms and their liberties. And we hold our arms open.
What do we want? How do we get it? What do we want? How do we get it?
This is a rally for May Day and Workers' Day, organised by Hastings Trade Union Council. We've suffered from 13 years of Tory misrule, in which there's been an absolutely massive shift in wealth to the rich and to the powerful. And we have a government that is descending into the gutter and playing the trump card of out-and-out racist scapegoating of refugees. And despite all the promises, all the COPs and all the rest of it, the use of fossil fuels is increasing, the planet is burning, there are places getting flooded. It's a horrendous prospect that's been developing over the last few years, and it looks like it's getting worse. But over the last year, something has changed in this country, and that is workers have started fighting back and going on strike. And this meeting is all about that fight back. Most of our speakers here today have recently been on strike, are about to go on strike, and are taking on the government on the cost of living crisis. We're also going to be talking about the rights of refugees. So the first speaker I want to call has been on strike on and off for the past year. The people, agency workers, the cleaners on the trains, the people who are treated like shit by their employers. I'm very proud to have on this platform from Hastings a leading representative of the RMT train cleaners, Bella Fashola.
Thank you. Thank you. I haven't wrote a speech because I'm just going to speak on what I've learned since joining the trade union movement. I'm 27 years old. I'm a train cleaner. I've been brought up in Hastings. And I've never learned so many good life values more than when I've been introduced to the trade union movement. For Workers' Memorial Day, I want to remember a cleaner who works or worked at a maintenance depot within Hastings who sadly lost his life due to outsourcing, due to the cutbacks made to the contract he was working on, to the insufficient training that you should have as a worker on the railway. Whether you're outsourced, whether you're agency, as a working person on the railway, you have to have sufficient training. Unfortunately, due to the cutbacks, his glasses fell on the third rail. The worker went down to pick up his glasses and sadly lost his life that day. This would not have happened if he was in-house. He would have had a visor to cover his glasses so they wouldn't have fallen on the track. He would have had the training that he would have needed to know not to put your hand by the third rail. So thousands of pounds were spent to make it safe or do a tick boxing exercise. And unfortunately, 7 years later, it's reverted back to the same spate, but just a different outsourced company, a different name on it basically. So I think the lesson that we all have to learn is whatever trade union you're in, whatever movement you're in, right now we need to stand together. We're all fighting for the same cause. We're all fighting for better, for our children, for our families, for us, the workers now. Whether you're a nurse, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a train cleaner, whether you're a firefighter, whether you're a postal worker, we have to stand together. We need to coordinate action. I don't know why it's not being done. It makes me very angry that it's not being done. The trains are a mess, let's be honest. They are a mess. It's not my fault, it's not my colleagues' fault. It's the fault of those outsourcing companies who continue to take and take and take through pure greed. And they sit in line with the Conservative Party, who also continue to take and take and take from pure greed. We can't allow this to happen. We have to stand together. We need a general strike, let's be honest. Don't know why it's not happening. We need a general strike now, and I will be pushing for it from my corner, and I want everybody in this room to do the same. We need a general strike. We need to stand together. We need to fight for our futures and keep on fighting. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker was on strike yesterday as part of a national strike against the government over pay. Debbie Davis from the PCS, Department of Transport, based in Hastings.
Hello. At the moment, there's 179,000 civil servants in food poverty and skipping meals. Needless to say, the MPs have not been subject to the same pay restraint. Their pay has risen by 30% in the same 13-year period. So usually, as civil servants, we have a pay award once a year. But this month, the admin assistants and officers in a DWP, including those in Hastings, they're the two lowest grades, received an additional pay award. The increase in the national minimum wage this month has meant that their wages would have been below the national minimum wage. So they've been given an increase to bring them up to the national living wage, which is pretty much the same thing if you're over 23 anyway. So most of the staff here in Hastings administering universal credit are now on the national minimum wage regardless of their experience. And finally, we just need to remember that it's a political choice not to give us a decent pay rise and to keep our salaries low. And we need to... We need to make sure that we support each other and we stick together. We shouldn't be set against each other, and this is not a race to the bottom. So, what are the chants from today? Remember, the workers united shall never be defeated. Solidarity.
So, Rosanna.
I set up the Refugee Buddy Project because I wanted to replicate the warm welcome my family had received when we came to the UK seeking refuge in the late 70s. Now, this is what I want to spend a little bit more time talking. What we witnessed here has been horrific and a violation of human rights. And this is where it's important that people really begin to understand what the hostile environment is and what it's actually doing to people. When we went to see the men at the hotel, we found many of them had no shoes, they were in flip-flops, they were hungry, they had no warm clothes, they had a series of untreated skin conditions, wounds, and unaddressed concerns. The Home Office contracted catering service had not delivered food the night before and had not delivered breakfast or lunch when we left that first day at 12 p.m. I was 9 years old when I left Chile, so I was able to actually witness quite a lot before I left. I never thought I would see or hear people being treated in this way in the UK. The community welcome in Hastings, though, has been amazing. The response has been huge to welcome the men and to help and to try and make them feel like they are welcome. Community kitchens are feeding the men, if not allowing them to cook for themselves using these kitchens. I want to particularly highlight the amazing local NHS staff who treated all the men with so much compassion as they heard about and treated their ailments. So on International Workers' Day, we celebrate the struggles for social change and call on you to join our Community Not Camps campaign, which opposes placing people in hotels, and in particular, the government's proposed plans to build a camp in Northside, just outside Bexhill. And I just want to finish by saying one thing. As a person who survived fascism in Chile, I never thought I would see this level of attack on marginalized people in this country, which welcomed my family. Future generations will look back at this time in the same way that we look back at the Pinochet era and ask, what did you do at this time? Did you stand by and let it happen, or did you resist? Thank you, comrades.
I'll particularly mention the Palestine Solidarity Stall. We know what's happening around the world, and we know what's happening in Palestine. There is a national demonstration in London on Saturday, May the 13th, in 2 weeks' time, quite an important one. It's the 75th anniversary of the expulsion of the Palestinians in 1948, the Nakba. And Palestine Solidarity Campaign here will be running transport, hopefully, up to that demonstration. They're going to have to do it because the RMT members are going on a national strike on Saturday, May the 13th. Our next speaker, Antonia Berroson. She's been part of the activist network within the RCN and the health service that overturned a recommended shit deal from the leadership of the RCN. So they're back out on strike tomorrow. Antonia.
How wonderful to be here in Hastings today, Mugsborough, the southeastern home of resistance, proudly flying the flag of solidarity for all striking workers, trade unionists, activists, for migrants and refugees, and proof that collectively we can have the power to effect change. The very healthcare workers that risk their lives to answer the call of duty, to nurse in a pandemic of an unknown pathogen with inadequate PPE, who at the beginning had nothing in their arsenal to treat patients with, who saw unimaginable suffering and lost colleagues. And yet, this very workforce has seen over 12 years of pay restraint, meaning our pay is essentially 30% less than it used to be. Schrodinger's nurses, not important enough to be paid properly, but too important to strike. In fact, this government would rather take the nurses to court. They prefer a courtroom to a negotiating table. Shame on them. And as for crisis, a word used so frequently to describe the state of things, the NHS, mental health, to cost of living, remember that the Greek word for crisis comes from sift, or separate, a decision, a choice. To sift, to shake out the excess and leave what is important. That's what crises do. They shake things up until we're forced to hold on to what really matters the most. The rest falls away. And so indeed, the NHS is more than the buildings, more than our greatest institution. It's its people, and no more so than its doctors, its nurses, its physiotherapists, its porters, its cleaners, its radiographers, and many more, but also the patients from cradle to grave. The NHS, fast approaching its 75th birthday, formed in the transformative years of the Attlee government, is the very best of us. And so, like in gold panning, how we sift through the particles to find the treasure beneath, so now we can find through this crisis our shared humanity to fight for the next 75 years. And we do this by recognising our strength. The government and their media will try to divide us, but we must stand together as a collective, working across unions, raising awareness and recognising our class solidarity. Thank you.
The fight goes on in education. Jenny Sutton from the NEU.
Well, thanks everybody, and it's a great privilege to be here. We are striking over pay. we're demanding an above-inflation pay rise. We've had 23% cuts in our pay in real terms since 2010, and we've fallen about 15% behind other graduate professions. We went to see Sally Ann Hart, our local MP, to put to her the case for school funding. It's Sally Ann heartless, Sally Ann useless. One of the things that she said to us was that the reason why our schools are being starved of funds is because the government are having to spend money to stop the small boats. We maintained our composure, but that's the kind of poisonous scapegoating that means that the fight against racism is absolutely central to our fight as trade unionists. We know that the real villain is the 13 years of austerity, where the government have organised a system where our money, our taxpayers' money, is being sucked out of public services and in private corporations, and that money is going to dividends for shareholders and is being stashed in tax havens. Our public services are being starved and are continuing to being starved. And when people say, look, everybody's suffering from pay cuts, you teachers are relatively well paid, what are you complaining about? The critical issue for us is that we are a strong union, and I think that we have an obligation as a strong union to set the bar for all workers. We have to fight. Because if we win our fight, that will embolden other groups of workers, that will have an impact across the public services, it will have an impact across the working class. And that is why we have an absolute responsibility as one of the strongest unions to mobilise our members and to say that we deserve a pay rise, but more importantly, our communities deserve decent public services. And the last thing I want to say is that for us, this is a fight for the future, for our kids, because we know that post-Brexit, the government's strategy is to create an environment in the UK that encourages overseas investment by business. And what do they want to encourage overseas investment? They want a low-wage economy where the unions have been pacified and where the Googles and the Amazons and the multinational corporations can make massive profits on our low wages. We want our kids to see that as trade unionists, we can fight for decent pay, but we can fight for dignity at work, no matter what kind of work you do. Whether you're a cleaner, a dustbin worker, whether you're a shopkeeper, whatever work you do, we deserve dignity, we deserve decent pay, we deserve decent public services. And this strike, we're not going to give up. The NEU has recruited 50,000 teachers since we announced strike action. Young teachers are coming into our union because they want to fight for their communities. That's the future, isn't it? It's solidarity, the unions together, public sector unions together, dealing with the issue, blaming the people that are really to blame, which is Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak, the people up the top, not blaming the desperate people coming in small boats who are actually becoming part of our community, and we welcome them in all our schools. But together we are stronger, together we are going to fight, and we're going to say to this government, we deserve better, our communities deserve better. The workers united will never be defeated.
There was a proposal at the last Trades Council meeting 2 weeks ago that on Saturday, May the 6th, there's something else going on then. On Saturday, May the 6th, we're planning a Stuff the Coronation picnic at Warrior Square. Warrior Square at 2 o'clock. Our last speaker to see today, and I'm very glad he's here, is Jeremy Corbyn, Islington North MP and friend of Hastings.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. To all these stalls that are here today, from the unions, from the campaigns, particularly from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign and from Jewish Voice for Labour, because we are all here to stand up for internationalism, to stand up against racism, and to unite our movement and our working class communities against this government. The way our history is taught disempowers people. The way we are presented as unions and activists is always designed to diminish and disempower us. Well, we're not diminished and we're not disempowered. How did we ever get the 8-hour working day? How did we ever get a 2-day weekend? How did we ever get a national health service? How did we ever get anti-discrimination legislation? How did we ever get health and safety and welfare at work legislation? Answer: trade union action, trade union membership, and trade union solidarity. I don't want our movement to get into government and go into power merely to preside over the most grotesque levels of injustice, poverty and inequality this country has ever seen. We're not there for that. We're there to redistribute power and wealth within our society, to end the tax evaders, tax exploiters and tax havens, and fund public services properly. Yes, it will be uncomfortable for the very wealthy in our society. It's time some of them suffered a bit of discomfort. Poverty wastes resources, wastes ability, and diminishes our society. I was asked during the last election campaign by a journalist, I must call them a journalist, from the Daily Mail, in front of an audience of almost 1,000 people, "Mr. Corbyn, are you a patriot?" So I said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely patriotic. And I want to be proud of my country. And I will be proud of my country when there are no homeless people, there is no poverty, every child gets a decent school and education, and we have a fully functioning national health service. That is when I'll be proud, because that is what we really are campaigning about." So we have to make this call on this International Workers' Day. We are with the victims of war, of human rights abuse, of environmental degradation. We are with them. For tomorrow, they'll be our doctors, they'll be our teachers, they'll be our neighbours, they'll be our friends. And stand up against the nasty, negative racism that refuses to acknowledge these are human beings merely trying to survive in a cold, cruel, and heartless world. And I say thank you to those many, many, many people in Hastings and all along the South Coast who've done so much to support and help very desperate people. I would not willingly get into one of those boats to go across the channel unless I was utterly desperate. Let's have a human approach to it, not the evils of the way the media are presenting these poor and desperate people to us. The person I want to quote is the great Pablo Neruda. "You can cut down all the flowers, but you cannot stop the coming of spring." Thank you.
Workers, united,